channel roadblocks that you don't have to tackle alone. You don't have to face these things alone. So Trevor and I are here. We're going to quickly introduce ourselves. You probably know one or both of us, but we're going to get right into the content as soon as we introduce ourselves. Trevor, why don't you start and then I'll take over from there.
Wait, I get to go first?
You get
Okay.
to go first. I wanted to see if I could kind of stump you.
I'm sure you will. You're gonna throw that in at like in the third part, and I'm gonna be like, wait, no, we're backtracking.
I would never do that.
So yeah, I'm Trevor Thomas. I am the director of channel growth here at Channel Sales Accelerator. I've been in the MSP space for over 5 years now, and in sales for over 20. I know I look young, or I think I look young, but trust me, this is all very thinning. Anyways, that's about as much intro as I'm gonna do.
Awesome. I'm Jennifer Bleem. I'm the founder at Channel Sales Accelerator, and I've been in the IT industry for 20 something years and in sales pretty much my whole life. At some point, I'll have to tell everybody my very first sales job. I was little, I was really young, but I love it. I love the IT industry. I love the channel, just like Trevor does. And we're going to be sharing some things today to help you solve some of the sales problems that we're finding and we're hearing about. So, sales challenges, insights, and introduce you to something that we're super excited about called Channel Sales Accelerator. So we're talking a lot today about our beta program, and we're also going to share a resource with you that you do not want to miss. So let's jump into the sales challenges and pain points. Trevor, let's go back and forth because I know one thing that I hear a lot is either pipelines that are sluggish or just a sales velocity is not as fast as they would want it to be. Maybe they wouldn't describe it as sluggish, but they would like a little more speed to revenue. Is that something that you hear a lot, or do you hear other things as well?
No, absolutely. And I want to kind of take one small step back.
Yeah.
And I posted about this earlier today. I actually shared your post and just put my comments on there. But we're looking at like kind of the sluggish pipeline and velocity. And I just want to kind of preface this with the resource that we're going to be giving out will give you an idea of what your pipeline should look like in terms of stages and setting it up. Because Jennifer and I have been doing this forever. We understand what the stages should be, what they mean. But if you're like, hey, I'm brand new into the sales, maybe you're founder led, something like that. Trust me, we're going to share something with you so you understand what that pipeline should look like. But yes, sluggish, velocity, stagnated pipelines, or things that always get stuck at a certain stage. Absolutely. I hear that day in and day out.
And then as we start to scale and we're looking at slightly larger companies with teams, what are some of the challenges you hear around teams?
Well, there's a couple different things, and it's one could be kind of you have this pipeline. So let's say you go from founder-led or single salesperson who's doing full cycle, and then you go, you know what, we're actually going to split this so that we've got an SDR and we've got an account executive. So your SDR is talking to people, drumming up that excitement, booking the first meeting, and then your account executive is taking it from that first meeting and trying to close it. Well, if you're all playing in the same sandbox pipeline, it can be very challenging because things are going to get missed or overlap. So one thing that I've found really effective there is to split the pipeline up or build in some automations, which is a bit more advanced. But the other part of it is actually having that pipeline with defined stages for your team. You can understand where things are kind of falling through the cracks by looking back and going, okay, we know that once the meeting gets booked, they're not getting attended properly. Well, maybe they're not being qualified, right? There's a bunch of indicators in that pipeline that you can look to.
Yeah, and data is your friend. I was actually talking to a client about that yesterday. When we first started working together, he really didn't have a pipeline. He really didn't have any data. He just knew he was getting deals at the beginning of the pipeline or the top of the funnel, if you think of it that way. And he just knew he wasn't getting enough at the bottom. And I'm like, okay, so you have people that are interested, but they never get to that first step. And he's like, right. And I'm like, what percentage of people are getting to that first step? And he didn't know. There just wasn't any data behind it, no metrics behind it.
Yeah.
So then as you start to add those team members, sometimes you just stack the losses. You're just stacking the bad habits, the bad systems, the non-systems. And then it may not always be that the team isn't meeting quota. Sometimes you have one rock star and the rest that are not. And there's this massive delta that you're constantly aware of. And then there's this angst. How do I get the lesser performing team members up to snuff And in order to do that, do I ignore my A player? That doesn't
Right.
quite feel right either. And so there's this tug of war inside of the mind of the sales manager or VP of business development on how to kind of level that playing field, or at least up level the bottom of the team.
Yeah, yeah. I remember one of my first business jobs. I was number one in the country, and we're talking of hundreds of sellers. I was number one in the company for booking meetings, but I was also in top three for actually closing business. And we had some people on our team. I think our team in my region was about 9 people, and they're like, "Well, how do you do it?" Right? And the SDR side of things, it was just prepping for my calls, which I know there's some back and forth. But what I really want to talk about here is that first meeting. And they're like, well, how do you go out there and just crush the business on these first meetings? I built myself a playbook. And this wasn't a kind of branching thing and ask these questions. I had my standard questions that I'm going to ask every prospect I sit with. But then I had a collateral book. And let's say I'm sitting with a CFO. Well, I had broken it down so that I had, here is for CEO, here's for CFO. Of course, I didn't label it. I don't want them to think that I'm profiling before we get into it.
Sure.
But essentially, the CFOs, that section is going to be all reporting. Here's how you have visibility on your spend. Here's how you can reduce that. Here's how you can use your credits, those types of things. This is a travel sales job.
Because they like
And
you.
well, yeah, it just, but the rest of the team was like, this is genius. So I built books for all of us. So you go to your meeting and you've got, your notebook, and then you've got your collateral book, and it lifted the entire team. So their closing ratios shot through the roof.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. And then another thing, if we kind of shift from, the quota isn't being met and we've got disparate team members, then it's like, okay, how do I train everybody?
Hmm.
And sometimes training can get deprioritized because the sales leader is constantly fighting fires, chatting with marketing, trying to figure out their messaging, hire and fire, meet with the team members every week. Like the CRO job or the sales leader job is a very, very busy job. So what have you seen or what are you hearing along that lines?
Well, so from a sales leader perspective, certainly looking to your top performers or using whatever data you have in front of you to go, okay, we know that there is this gap, right? So I like data driven everything, where you can go, okay, from the first meeting to, negotiate, propose and negotiate, we have a gap there, right? So you can look back. But I think for when you're managing a team, it's really important to standardize the training so that everyone kind of has this level playing field in terms of what they have access to, right? Go back to your top performer. If your top performer maybe has previous experience in this role, and you have 4 newer people or people who aren't used to the sales cycle or the product, etc., it can be very challenging to get those other 4 people up. Whereas if you have, and you can work with your top performer and saying, "What are you doing?" and then pass that along. But then at least everyone's got kind of this base knowledge that's the same. And then from there, you can again go back to the data and go, okay, A, B, and C are doing really good. D's not doing very good. Now I can focus on this one who's, I don't want to say weaker, but struggling a bit more and figure out what their issues are.
Sure. And it is complex because you're talking to humans. They all have their different learning styles. But I like what you said about standardizing that training, because if you do have 4 sellers and 3 out of the 4 are getting it, and the fourth one isn't, that should be cause for concern. Maybe it's not an alarm bell. Maybe we're not terminating them, but it should go in your mental filing folder about that team member, because either they aren't getting it because they're not in the right seat on your bus, or they're not getting it because they're just not cut out for your organization or your learning style, your teaching style. So I love that, standardizing that training. And then one thing that I'm starting to hear, especially as we go up market a little bit and we're talking to those organizations who have a board of directors or they have an executive team that they answer to, is that they almost feel like they're caught in a firing squad or a kind of an uncomfortable situation every month or every quarter when they meet with that board, because they're being asked uncomfortable questions. And it could be about training or quota or doubling our numbers or hitting certain EBITDA. So are you hearing that as well? And what would your advice be kind of from the outside looking in?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to standardizing a bit of training. And it's not because, obviously channel sales accelerator, that's a big part of what we do, but it's, let's just say that Jennifer and I are just talking right now, and there's nothing, we're not trying to promote anything. We're just
Sure.
having an honest sales conversation. If you go, okay, I've got 100 fires in front of me, If you can put out 10 of them, then you can focus on the other 90. And it's the same thing with standardizing that training, right? You can pick out, okay, what's wrong with our process? Who needs more help? And if you say, okay, A, B, and C are now at a level that I don't have to really worry about them, I'm not saying training's ever set it and forget it, because it's not. But okay, A, B, and C are good. Now I can focus on D, and then I can go to those board meetings and go, okay, our rock star, we'll just call them star, and A, B, and C are all doing really good. D, I'm working with 1-to-1 so that we can achieve those quotas, or so that our revenue targets are being met, or insert whatever KPIs you're having those uncomfortable conversations about. Now you can address them and say, look what I'm doing. These are the things that I've put in place. I know that there are challenges. Here's how we're addressing them, and talk to it a bit more confidently.
I love that. And one more thing related to meeting board of director expectations and anticipating questions. I'm in the middle of reading a book called The AI Driven Leader, and it's all about using AI as a thought partner. I will never give up the thought leadership position, but I want AI to act as my thought partner. And there's
Mm.
actually tips in that book on how to train AI to ask you questions like your board of directors would. And so you train the AI and you start to create personas for the different people on your board of directors and have them grill you weeks before the meeting so that you can start to anticipate those questions, put plans in place similar to what you were just speaking about, and then you aren't caught flat-footed. So I thought that was a very brilliant use of AI that I'm not sure I've seen before.
And you just keep blowing my mind with the level of AI ingenuity that you're coming up with, right? Can I ask ChatGPT to do me a bio, which I did yesterday? Yeah, for sure. That kind of stuff, though, is incredibly valuable, and can save you, sleepless nights, but also prep you for big meetings. And I'm sure you could repurpose that for a lot of sales-driven things as well.
You 100% could. What's interesting is I'm starting to work on a series of prompts specifically around sales because so many leaders that I talk to, channel executives, business leaders, we don't have enough time to think. We are trying to do more with less. It's kind of the almost like a biblical make bricks with no straw, and so we are constantly time strapped, and then we don't take the time to think. There is no time to think and to process and to wrestle. And many of us have great abilities to think, but you can't squeeze thinking in between 8 business meetings per day, like I had a few days ago. Walked out of that day wrung out and exhausted, and savvy enough to say that can never happen again because I am not at my best when I have 8 meetings. It just cannot work. So what I have started doing at the end of every week is I have a verbal dialogue, and I'm starting to train my AI to ask me a series of questions. And so around sales, it's like, how is your pipeline velocity? How's your pipeline volume? What are some of the concerns that you're holding in your head? And would you like me to weigh in on how to solve those? And I literally had a 1 hour dialogue with the AI that I'm training, and it forced me to stop and think about things that were kind of nagging at the periphery, but I hadn't put any time actually into solving the problems. So then what happens is we carry around the weight of the world, but we never take time to remove any of that weight. And I think that's why mental health is a challenge, and some of us age before we should. Like, we start to look much older than we actually are. And so this is a
I'm right
great way to use
here.
AI.
I'm right here, Jennifer. I can hear you.
Talking about myself.
Sure you were. Sure.
I was talking about myself, really. All right. So I don't want to paint this as doom and gloom. We've kind of painted throughout this some of the solutions, some ways to solve these problems that are very practical and tactical. But let's talk about the power of a guide, whether that's an AI guide or it's a human that you can interface with, because the best sales leaders really still need someone to point out their blind spots, to challenge their thinking. Transparently, if I wanted someone to tell me my ideas were all brilliant, that's when I would go to AI, because it seems to be programmed to say, that's a brilliant idea, Jennifer. And I'm like, okay, I don't want you to tell me my idea is brilliant. I mean, if it is, please, of course, I will take all of the kudos I can get. But what I really need is someone, either a person or a bot, who can poke holes in my idea and say, well, have you thought of it that way? Or that's good, but that might be the more complicated way to do it. Or that's good, but maybe here's a smarter way, a more savvy way. Here's some technology you might consider to leverage to make it go faster. So having that guide to point out blind spots or to act as a sounding board. Sounds like that's working based on what you're telling me. Why are you concerned? Like, oh, okay, that's great. Let's talk that out. Again, AI or a human guide. So, how about what have you seen, whether it's in your sales life or your personal life, where having that guide, that sounding board has been efficient and helpful for you?
Yeah, so and I think I'll go more personal life first. And this is something that has surprised me. I think it continues to surprise me actually, is that there are people who are just inherently great at things. And I'll give you an example. I used to play very high level pool, like semi-pro pool. I'm not very good anymore. So if you see me at an event and you want to play pool for money, I'm not
Mhm.
going to win probably. Let's just do it. But
You will probably win if you're playing me, but that's okay.
yeah, well, and I mean, we'll just play for drinks or something. It'll be totally harmless. But
Sure, sure.
so, so I didn't really have a coach when I was at this level, and a lot of the best players in the city in Calgary, up here in Canada, is one of the hot spots for pool. We just had one of the most famous Canadian players, Alex Peggy-Line, in town, and he had a big tournament here. Anyways, all of that to say that there are some incredible pool players who are going down to Vegas and they're winning consistently. They're taking down world champions, and you look at them, and every single one of them has a coach.
How about
And
that?
well, but it's weird, right? Because you just go out, you practice, practice, practice. But that outside perspective of, okay, well, maybe you don't need to bank here, or this safety, or I'm not going to get too technical on the pool jargon, but having someone say, hey, there might be a better way to do this goes a long way. So I took a couple of years off, and I had a friend playing with me, and he was like, you used to be really good. What's going on? And he's like, I'm just going to watch you play for a couple of games. And he's like, okay, here's two changes I've noticed that you used to do all the time, that you're no longer doing. One of them is you're taking riskier shots, so try not to do that. Again, I'm trying not to get too technical. The other one is he's like, you're rushing. He's
Ah,
like, before every shot, I want you to line it up, and then when you get down and you're actually lining it up in your stance, I want you to take 2 breaths and then take your shot, right? And this is just that outside perspective. And I
yeah,
went from being like 72% win rate to an 85% just by making that one small tweak, right? So
yeah,
that outside perspective helped
yes.
incredibly.
That outside perspective is so good because there's this saying, you can't see the label from inside of the bottle. Inside of the bottle, you're stuck. You don't know why, or your ideas are brilliant because you came up with them. And let's face it, we don't come up with ideas that we think are bad. And sometimes we need that outside observer to say, can I tell you what I'm seeing? And sometimes that is calling me on the carpet as far as my excuses or setting my goals too low or setting my goals too high, or wait a second, you've now changed your mind 3 times in 3 weeks. Maybe that's legit, or maybe we've uncovered a pattern and maybe that's confusing your team. And so having that outside guide, the coach, the sounding board is so important.
It,
Okay,
it,
you go ahead. Did you have one more thing to add?
yeah, I was just going to say that because like I've also captained a pool team for 20 plus years, and I've also run multiple sales teams. It is not a comfortable thing to say I might need help, but it should be. If you
Yes.
actually are trying to get better at in work and life, again, having that outside perspective, not necessarily someone with more experience. Of course, that's going to help. Usually, it's going to accelerate that process. But just looking at yourself and going, I have one way of thinking. Having that outside perspective maybe it changes nothing, but at least it provides me that sounding board, that outside perspective that can actually help me grow, or it can help me grow the ways that I'm doing things and go, I'm not doing that because of this, and it reinforces things that you're already doing properly. So
I
yeah,
love
that was
that.
that was
No, and that kind of brought us full circle because you talked a couple of minutes ago about how you look at every pro, whether it's a pro football player, a pro tennis star, or ice skater, they all have coaches.
everyone.
And so somehow in our minds, when we think having a coach means I'm showing a weakness and I want to have a stiff upper lip and this brilliant exterior, like I have all of the answers, None of us have all of the answers. Some of us have all the answers within a very tight vertical, but that doesn't mean we have all the answers to life and and business. And so having coaches is so important, and that's not a sign of weakness. I would argue it's actually a sign of strength. So
Yes, and self-reflection, if nothing else, strength and self-reflection, because
yes.
you're going, how do I get better? How do I actually achieve what I want to achieve instead of just going it alone and going with the punches? Yeah, it's not the best way to do it.
Yeah, agreed. And that's the perfect tee up. And we did not practice that, but the perfect tee up to talk about Channel Sales Accelerator. So, this is a brand new offer that we are bringing to the industry because we've had individually so many vendors come to us and say, can I pick your brain? Can I get some help? Can I get some sales coaching for me personally, for my team? Can you look at my go to market playbook? And there is a need for an organization that helps channel vendors. What's interesting is that when we first started kicking this idea around, we did some market research and we found, your typical channel chiefs. These are amazing people. I think I know most of them, maybe not all of them, but they come into the organization and they take over the sales. They often become the face of the business, and that's okay if that's what an organization wants. They become almost, they're not the CEO, but definitely more VP of business development, but the face of the business. And they
Hmm.
bring their playbooks and their systems, and that's fine. That's one extreme. And then, kind of at the other extreme, are, I kind of call it putting a band-aid on the problem, where they'll come in and maybe they do a quick assessment and they train with the team for a month and then they leave. And the challenge is that the sales teams forget very quickly what they were trained on. There's no continuous reinforcement, and there isn't much in between. So we've got, hey, I'll hire a channel chief who can take over all the things, or hey, I'll bring in a consultant for a 30-day stint, but there's nothing in between. And that's what Channel Sales Accelerator is covering, is the coaching, the consulting, ongoing training for all of the people on your team. That's one of the things I'm the most excited about, is role-based training. So let me hand it over to you. Tell me what you're excited about and where you feel like it fits in the marketplace.
Yeah, well, I think if we go back to, was it May of last year that we had a really in-depth conversation about
Yeah.
this, going, we're already doing this. We're both doing this one-off for companies and consulting with them. But I think one of the things that excited me the most about our conversation is I'd been going to a lot of shows, and I remember a couple of the bigger names in the industry. I saw them at the booth, and I'm like, "What are you doing at the booth? You're orchestrating." And we go back to overwhelm, or wearing a bunch of hats, or dealing with your board of directors. I'm like, "What are you doing at the booth?" And they're like, "Well, my team isn't trained to where they need to be for a trade show. Certainly not for qualifying, capturing leads, disqualifying, which is just important. So I want to be here so that I can make sure that they're doing everything effectively so that we get ROI off of this event." And I'm like, okay, but don't you have a million? You're on stage. You've got a 45-minute keynote. You're organizing for your next 4 events because you're going to one every week. How are you? Is this taking away from your priorities? And they're like, yeah, absolutely, right. And that was one story, and I heard it a couple times at the same show. So bringing in something that I feel, A, we're both very qualified to do, and B, that is very needed in this space. That's what excites me the most.
Yeah, what's funny is that we have that again. We're kind of a pendulum swing, right? Like the owner or the senior sales leader who's doing it all themselves, and there's usually legitimate-ish reasons for doing it. I haven't trained the team yet. The team is junior. I don't trust anybody else to do it. That's also a training issue. And then we have the other extreme, and I'm sure you and I both have stories where the sales leader sends their team and the team doesn't even show up when the booth time is open. The booth isn't set up when the doors open, so the person's like scrambling or not. Sometimes there's no sense of urgency at all, and we have a booth that's completely empty, or a booth that's being assembled while the guests are streaming around. And the sales leader would be horrified if they see it, but they're not there, so they don't see it. So we can have those two extremes. So it's just fascinating to me, the different things that I see on the floor of these trade shows.
Oh, I did a post last week of, how do I put this politely, but the stuff I've seen, and I'm sure we'll continue to see at trade shows, and it's not stuff that's just bad practice. It's stuff that, again, sales leaders or even people who've never been to a trade show go, "What are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
you're here to work. Get to the booth, you know." I don't want to rag on anyone.
Right. I mean, sometimes I take pictures of like the empty booth with, people standing around. Or I was working an event with Des, say 6 months ago, 4 months ago, and there was a vendor, and I genuinely don't remember who they were, so they will remain nameless. And literally, they were not at their booth, but there was an MSP standing there flipping through the collateral. Well, and not just like, oh, let me pick it up and I'll look at it later. No, like reading the white paper. And I'm like, that is a lead that just got burnt.
Yeah.
And I've thought about taking pictures before and having kind of a wall of shame, but I don't know. That's a little cheeky, but maybe I'll do it anyway and just embrace the cheekiness. So, okay, so we've got Channel Sales Accelerator. We've talked a little bit about the coaching, the consulting. There's role-based coaching and role-based modules that people get access to, quarterly business reviews. Let's shift to who Channel Sales Accelerator is right for. Let's park about that a little bit. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but let's reiterate for anybody who's just joining us.
Wait, is that to me?
That's for you. You said I was going to catch you once, and that is the once. I will try not to do it again.
No. That's totally fine. I'm just like, is it silent? Is the internet down somewhere? I don't know what's happening.
Trevor, who do you feel like it's right for?
I don't want to say everyone, because it's not going to be right for everyone, right? There are people who are very on top of stuff, who have seasoned sales leaders who have a lot of this stuff in place. But I'm going to say that that's not the norm, right? We've had interest from, one person founder based company all the way up to people, CROs, who are managing teams of 15 plus.
Yep.
Right. 100%. I think it's for the people who are looking at their sales program from start to finish. That includes events, qualifying, SDR, AE, CAMs, even CROs to a certain extent, and going, I feel like I'm missing something. I feel like this is overwhelming, or I don't understand my metrics. So there's a bunch of different facets, which you kind of covered off, to this program that can really shore up your sales process from start to finish. So who's it for? Anyone who's not hitting quota and doesn't really think that they've got the best grasp, or needs that outside perspective to bounce things off of.
Yeah, and one of the things that we haven't mentioned is that for the beta people, we only have 9 beta spots left. That is not fake scarcity, and you'll know why in a second. The beta companies that join, they actually get twice a month coaching with Trevor and I. So it's Trevor and me and whoever from your sales team you want in the room. And because it is time, like we can't automate that. We can't outsource that to a team member. The team is still really small today. We cannot onboard more than 9 people into the beta program. And so you will get some one-on-one attention, whereas in 6 months or so, that one-on-one attention will be quickly going away. And you, as a beta person, will have gotten a whole lot of individualized attention, which is amazing. So, and then I want to reiterate, it's not a short term, like a 30-day Band-Aid. We've got 6-month plans and 12-month plans because humans need constant reminders. We all go through these cycles. It could be where the leads aren't coming in. It could be where the team has some ebbs and flows in just their natural energy. It could be that you've had a comedy of errors and a lot of your sales team members have had personal challenges. And so that has an impact on your pipeline. And that's another good reason not to just bring in a 30-day fix, because if their ebb happens to be happening while that sales trainer comes in, you're not going to get as much value for the energy and effort and investment that you've made.
Yeah. And not only that, but if you do, and I don't want to rag on 30-day programs, because there is value in a lot of them, and I've gone through a couple that I took a ton of value away from. But if we go back to the baseline, and let's say that today I go through a 30-day program, I'm going to be at the end of that 30-day program, wherever that 30-day program is. Whereas if I go into something that's longer term, that meets me where I'm at initially, so that's baselining it, and then go, okay, in 2 months, I think I've mastered these 5 pieces of the generic sales. I want to get a bit more advanced, or I want to move from an SDR into an AE spot, or
Yes.
grow into a bigger role, or understand what the other roles are doing. Well, now I can do it kind of on my own terms, and have the support, through the learning platform, through the weekly calls. I have that support to actually grow into that.
I love that. And you hit on something that I want to dig in at a little bit of a different level. As humans, right now we're all still humans selling to humans. That may change in our lifetime, but we have to be reminded of things. Like I can't tell you the number of my own sales calls that I go back and I audit, and I do go back and do that, and I have forgotten some fundamentals. Kind of like you were talking about when you play pool. Like when you haven't played for a while, or sometimes when you get a little too comfortable in your sales seat, you get a little lazy, like it happens to all of us. Sometimes you have to be reminded, hey, you know how you used to, I don't know, create interest before you got on the sales call, or whatever the fundamental might be. And that piece you haven't done that anymore. I was actually talking to a colleague. He has everybody on his sales team fill out like a pre-sales call, whatever checklist or something, and it's things that are pretty standard, like what do you know about their company, what do you know about their industry, what's the goal of this sales call, what do you know about the individual you're going to meet with, if you could accomplish one thing, what would it be, what would a question be that would allow you to uncover that and move this forward. And he hadn't been doing sales calls as the founder because he had a team, and a sales call got thrown to him because of whatever reason. I think he had someone on vacation. So he took the sales call and he skipped that. He didn't do the checklist at all. And he botched the sales call. He's like, I botched it. We lost that deal. And I said, so what did you do? And he said, I did two things. Number one, I made a recommitment to going back to the system that I, the founder, created. And I'm like, good for you. And I said, what's the second one? He kind of looked sheepish and he's like, I played it for the team and I let them roast me. And I'm like, good for you.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's leadership. Like, you got to step up and go, guys, I made a huge mistake and it cost us this amount of money. But it also was like, and that is why I tell you to do it every time, because it works. And when you don't do it, like I didn't do yesterday, it didn't work. And I just thought that was fantastic. So having that reminder system, someone that's in your ear, nagging you. I do this with a couple of clients, nagging you. It's usually friendly and bantering, but I'm like, are you okay if I nag you a little bit? And they're like, I know what's coming. And I'm like, it's because I love you. And then I'm like, that's like the third week in a row you've given me the same excuse. Is there a deeper issue here? Do we have a systems problem? Or do you just need to carve out time on your calendar and get it done?
Yeah.
And that sometimes you need that outside person to call you like that.
Yes, yeah. The accountability is really important. I went through a coaching program 2 years ago, and I don't want to look at myself and be like, oh, I'm the best salesperson in the world, because I don't think I am. I think I'm good, above average. I've won some awards. I've been top performer at most of the companies I've worked for. But going through this coaching program, there was a bunch of stuff that I knew was a good idea, or metrics I knew I should be tracking, that I wasn't, and it allowed me to have someone say, you need to be doing these things. So instead of me going, okay, there are 20 different irons I should have in the fire, and I've got 5 of them, and these other 15 are over here, it allowed me to go, oh, there's these 5 of those 15 irons that I need to pick up and put back into that fire, right? Reinforcing good habits, things that I knew I should be doing, but it was deprioritizing based on other things that were just noise. So yeah, it was
100%.
really good.
Yeah, totally true. Okay, so I'm going to drop the URL and let me share that on the screen. So if you want more information on Channel Sales Accelerator, go out to mspsalesrevolution.com/CSA-details. That is Channel Sales Accelerator details. And you are seeing we are definitely in startup mode. We're still spinning up our website. Trevor mentioned we've got a great resource coming out. We are double checking it for functionality quality and making sure there's no typos, but it's fantastic, all about how to help you with your pipeline. But if you go to CSA-details, you can download a dossier that gives you all kinds of information about the program, whether or not it's a fit for you. Of course, we are a sales organization, so expect Trevor or I to reach out to you. We're pretty low key. We are pretty low pressure because this is either a fit or it is not. And if it's a fit, we'll talk about what it looks like from an investment standpoint. If it's not a fit, you're going to get one of us on the phone giving you free advice. So it really is a win-win no matter what you do. So, all right, before we wrap, Trevor, any last thoughts that you have?
No, I think we covered everything off pretty well. You only threw me under the bus that one time. Yeah,
I'll try to step up my game next time and do it.
Yeah, I was like, quota was once under the bus for this go. I think next time we should do 2 or 3.
2 or 3. All right, you got it. You got it. Amazing. All right, reach out to either Trevor or myself if you've got questions, or download the details at mspsalesrevolution.com/CSA-details, and we will be in touch. Have a great rest of your day. Trevor, thanks for your time.
Likewise. Cheers.